Alright, YouTube, apparently a Mexican military helicopter crossed north of the border earlier and fired on our Border Patrol agents. Believe it or not, the defense of the border has gotten to the point where not only now are we not really defending it against illegal immigrants, which again, I don't really care about that issue. I wish it was more structured, but whatever. But this was a military helicopter, a Mexican military helicopter. Now, I would like to believe that our southern neighbor, that their military has enough training so that if they're in one of these helicopters, they kind of know where the border is. You can sort of see the border. It's right next to the big fence with the road next to it, where you start seeing signs in English rather than Spanish. That's what the border looks like for most of it. I find it difficult to believe, maybe I'm completely wrong, that the Mexican military is so poorly trained that these pilots apparently don't know where the border is. Also, they've got things like radar and GPS nowadays that sort of tell you where you are. I'm not sure if they understand how to use these programs, apparently not. But they crossed into U.S. airspace, fired on Border Patrol agents, and then went back. And Mexico issues an apology. We're sorry we destroyed your Border Patrol vehicle. We're sorry we almost killed several of your Border Patrol agents. But it's okay, because here's an apology. It's not okay. What this shows me is that Obama simply is completely done with the idea of defending the border. That he really doesn't care. And the Mexican government now knows this. They know he's not going to react no matter what they do, short of actually invading the country with thousands of tanks or something. So they know that it would be very funny to tell this Mexican helicopter, go north of the border, fire on a few agents and come back. We'll issue an apology. We'll test the waters here. Because Washington's not going to do anything, because they don't give a fuck. So again, regardless of the fact that I don't really care how many immigrants come into this country, and regardless of the fact that I think most of them should be given green cards, and I believe we should return to the immigration standards we had about a century ago, where if you weren't a communist or sick or a felon or something, then you can come into the country right away. I believe that that should be the way we do business. We should have a land of immigrants. In fact, we should have a new Homestead Act for some of these unused federal lands. They're building like fucking solar cells everywhere when they could just mount them on existing structures and use this land for something else. But the people in DC are completely stupid. They don't understand what they're doing. They're just grabbing up this land and giving it to the fucking Chinese all the time to make their energy developments. Because we'd rather apparently do business with the Chinese now than with the Middle East, even though we do actually have a few allies in the Middle East we can sort of count on. But apparently Obama has basically said, what border? I don't care about the border. Now, I don't have a problem with the immigrants, but I do have a problem with the idea that a Mexican military helicopter buzzes the border, fires on Americans, and then goes back south, and all we get is an apology. What we should do is, in turn, do the same thing. Maybe go blow up a storefront. Maybe fire a Tomahawk missile at one of their military bases. Maybe send a couple battleships off their coast to pound them for a few hours. That's what we should do. And we should reassert the fact that the United States, not the Mexican government, is master over the Western Hemisphere. We should assert our hegemony, and if they refuse to admit it, then we should invade their country. And I'm not joking here. I'm not talking about, butcher the blood of the innocent or whatever. I'm talking about we should tell the Mexican government, you will stand down now, we will occupy your country for a few weeks and embarrass you, and then we'll go back. And maybe we'll annex Baja California or something like that. It would be funny because there's absolutely nothing they can do about it. If this were done in some parts of the world, it would be considered an act of war. And people would already be killing one another. It takes a great deal of restraint to deal with some of the problems on the southern border that we deal with every day. If this happened, for instance, the United States government, Obama included, continue to push the idea that if something like this happens in Israel, that the Israelis are more than within their rights to go bomb civilian targets and commit literal genocide. Day in and day out, this happens. Every week it's a new story about a new business that was blown up by one of their helicopters, or they dropped white phosphorus, or they fired artillery into a suburban neighborhood and flattened a few dozen Palestinian homes. And apparently that's okay, but when it comes to our own border, we can do nothing. We just expect an apology. Were these helicopter pilots not aware that there was a border in their way? Are they unaware of the laws surrounding invading other countries' airspace? We don't routinely fly U.S. helicopters into Mexican airspace and begin shooting things. And yet Mexico does this and we have no problem with it. And their president's already basically told us to fuck ourselves. The Mexican government is helping coordinate these trains full of Central American immigrants, and some Mexican immigrants as well, to get them north of the border. They guard the trains. The trains get loaded with thousands of immigrants in Honduras or Nicaragua or wherever, and the Mexican government says as long as these people don't come off the train, they don't give a fuck. Because they've given up trying to defend their border as well. They figure now it's easier to simply take these people that want to get smuggled through Mexico and let them ride a train almost all the way to the border. And then they get smuggled in by either the coyotes or they just walk across now at these border stations and they let themselves get captured. All they've got to do is be 2 feet on American soil and it's fine. So while I don't have a problem with these immigrants, we need to at least defend the border in some way, shape, or form, or we might as well just disband the Border Patrol, remove all the fences, declare there to be no border, and say it's completely permeable, anyone can walk either way they want all the time. But guess what? If a group of Americans goes down to Mexico illegally, they get captured, they get thrown in jail for years. If an American helicopter were to cross south of the border and begin shooting at things, the Mexican military would attempt to blow it out of the sky. With primitive weapons, but they would try. So why aren't we doing the same thing? We should at least hold them to the same standards that they hold our men. For the first time in my life, I actually sort of feel sorry for the Border Patrol. And it takes a lot to do that, because normally I say I'm pro-immigration, so I don't particularly think that when they round these people up and send them back to God knows where to be raped by cartel members, I don't think that's a good thing. I don't agree with that one way. In any way. But you can't just fly a military copter over the border and start shooting at the Border Patrol. That's a totally different issue. It's completely divorced from the immigration issue. Because, I mean, the military helicopter didn't land and the soldiers didn't come out and say, Viva America, we're immigrating to this country and defecting or anything. That's not what happened. They went back down to Mexico. These are Mexican soldiers. They should know better. Is their training just not adequate enough for them to know where the border is? Are they that stupid? And the Mexican president who says, fuck America, does nothing. Oh, we're sorry. We're sorry that we destroyed this vehicle and almost killed several of your border agents. Yeah, let's do the same thing and fire at one of their tanks or something like that. Fire at one of these armored Humvees they've got and cripple it. And then watch the soldiers stumble out bleeding from their legs. And then say, oh, we're sorry. We didn't realize what side of the border we were on. It's not like the signs that were completely in Spanish didn't give it away. It's not like we didn't realize we had crossed over the border because there's a fence and a road there, and it's fairly clear where the border is. We're sorry. Here's an apology. We're not going to pay you anything. We're not going to say, oh, we admit that what we did was kind of almost an act of war. What would happen if the North Koreans flew a helicopter south of the DMZ? Immediately, the area would erupt into chaos, and guess what? We've got American troops there that would be firing too. If this happened there, or if it happened in the Middle East, or Africa, or most of Latin America, or even parts of like Europe, it would be a war. But because apparently apparently Obama's so unconcerned and so naive that he doesn't consider these little issues to be important. The problem is when you let these little issues accrue, when you let them sort of group together and build up, they become larger. First, it was illegal immigrants are crossing the border, and nobody did anything. Then it was the Mexican government is actually coordinating trains of illegals, most of which aren't even from Mexico, they're from Central America, to go to north of the border, and we did nothing. Now the Mexican military helicopter comes across and fires on our border patrol. Guess what? I bet Obama will do nothing. He might send a strongly worded letter. Or he might come out and say, I'm deeply concerned about the problems in Mexico, but ultimately he will do nothing. We should retaliate in some manner. This is unacceptable. You have to defend the border. Otherwise, what's the point of having a border? We might as well just say, okay, it's Pax Americana time. Canada and Mexico, it's time to blend up. We're one country now, and if you disagree, we nuke you. We might as well do that. Now, I'm one of those people who actually would smile upon the idea of a North American Union, because I would love to go down to the Mayan ruins and not have to get a visa to do it. And I would love to go see New Brunswick, and Vancouver, and some of these other nice areas. I would love to do that, but guess what? That's not the way things work right now. There's a border there, and you've got to defend the border. The president is tasked with the defense of the border. This is an executive function. He's even leaning on these states that border Mexico and not letting them guard their border. Can you imagine Rick Perry, who I don't like Rick Perry either. He's like another Bush, basically, which Obama is as well, but Obama's a Democrat, so most people don't realize it yet. Rick Perry must be like sitting there sweating and moaning and drinking more whiskey because he realizes how fucked up it is. Jan Brewer must practically be having a stroke right now, as she's even worse than Rick Perry. She looks like a vulture to me, but at least she supports the idea that we should kind of defend the border. I think her immigration views are ridiculous, but you kind of got to defend the border from attack by military units. Apparently, we are no longer doing that. It's ridiculous. What more proof do you need that Obama is completely detached and doesn't know what the hell he's doing? Even Bush, in all of his ignorance, in all of his horribly moronic stupidity, would not have allowed this to fly. If this had happened under the Bush years, he at least would have said, heh, fuck yourself. And he would have probably put tanks on the border and then dared them to do it. And, of course, Bush was a little bit more violent towards the immigrants, which I think is nutty as well, but at least the border was somewhat well defended, border wall plans failing notwithstanding. You've got to do something. It's going to get to the point where where these states are going to have to act unilaterally, mobilize the National Guard, put them on the border. And when Obama complains and says you can't do that, they should say, fuck you. And they should say, we will defend our border. And you're not going to stop. What's Obama going to do? It seems like Obama would rather take up arms against the states or against his own citizenry, because he treats us all like criminals with the NSA and shit, just like Bush did, again, than bother doing anything on the southern border. And meanwhile, he's asking for $500 million to fund the FSA in Syria. Well, that's going to be great. The problem is that's giving money to ISIS. They already have $500 million that they robbed from banks in Mosul. So why the hell did they need our money? They're now massing on the Saudi border, even though the Saudis funded them too. It's clear they're going to backstab the Saudis now and probably attack them as well and try to take land in that northwestern region. What do you think they're going to do to Big Brother USA when they get through doing what they're doing in the Middle East? Can you say more 9/11s? Of course you can, because 9/11 was also committed by people who we funded and trained, who were from Saudi Arabia largely. It's the Saudis, where we give billions of dollars and all sorts of cool toys every single goddamn year. His plans, the way they are formulated, will fail. Obama has failed this nation. On the most rudimentary of levels, he has been a failure. And yet there are people who still support him, even though now apparently we're not even defending the border. We might as well just dismantle this fence and let everyone walk across. You know what? I think that'd be an interesting idea. I want to go walk down to the Mayan ruins. I don't want to have to take a plane. I want to walk through the desert and then through the jungle and over some mountains to get there. We might as well not even have, and the Canadian border, we barely defend that too. All sorts of illegal immigrants fly into Canada and walk across the northern border. The only reason we don't defend that is it's so large there's no way to. It costs too much money. You can't build a fence that's that, you'd have to build essentially another Great Wall of China to actually wall it off, and have the Coast Guard in the Great Lakes firing on any ships that enter our water space illegally. Come on, people. Really, we've got to do something about the border. My ideas are way more progressive than most Americans, including some liberals. But you can't allow the Mexican military to just fly its choppers north and fire on the Border Patrol. You might as well replace these people's guns with dildos, because they're apparently not allowed to use them anyway. At least they can use the anal dildos, or anal beads, or whatever else the government issues to